Hey, I'm Joel from the blog Further. I'll give you a link downstairs. And this is my video about a topic that's actually really interesting and really important to me. Obviously, our culture's fight against racism is not yet over. However, somehow a lot of people aren't aware of the connection between racism and the history of the war on drugs, especially the prohibition of marijuana. Anti-pot proponents will cite a lot of things to justify their position, like health problems, social problems, addiction, etc., but much less attention is paid to the circumstances under which marijuana became illegal in the first place. I have a disclaimer here. If you haven't given these topics any thought before, my opinions may seem unrealistic and radical. I think everyone who openly does drugs is demonized by society and characterized as crazy or incompetent, but I hope you at least hear me out. This is not speculation and can be backed up by resources that I will provide for you. To read both a summation and a source of the ideas outlined here, you can take a look at my blog post, Why Pot Supporters Shouldn't Use the Term Marijuana. I'll provide a link down there, so once you're finished watching, you can take a look. Black citizens are arrested for marijuana possession at a much higher rate than their white peers. In fact, their rates for drug arrests fluctuate between 2 and 5 times as high as whites, which is absolutely ridiculous. This statistic shows a very real prejudice against minority races in America and their suspected criminal status. This is indicative of a trend of prejudice that has been in place for over a century. While marijuana has been used in the Middle East and Asia for thousands of years, Europe did not have the same experience. European culture is prejudiced against any psychoactive besides alcohol, which they relied on due to unclean water. That's mainly because all the psychoactives that grew in Europe really sucked. Fly agaric, which was popular among Scandinavian shamans, has side effects like nausea, seizures, and coma. What little experience Europeans did have with their native hallucinogens, like belladonna, mandrake, and hemlock, they associated with witches and demons and other scary figments of the Christian imagination. Obviously, contemporary American culture owes a lot to its European ancestry. The Puritan Englishmen who first started stealing land from the Native Americans brought with them their prejudice against psychoactive of any kind. However, since North America's main exports to Europe at that time were tobacco and coffee, those became added to the same realm of acceptance as alcohol. This strange disparity can possibly be chalked up to cultural values, as Europeans valued material gain, whereas the Native Americans, some of whom obviously used peyote, put a higher value on spiritual experiences. But the fact is that it happened. Anyway, Europeans and white Americans mainly associated hemp with its many non-smoking uses, like making rope and fabric. Its medicinal use was known, but it was not really smoked or used recreationally at all. Aside from alcohol, the first drug that Americans really had any experience with was opium. Chinese immigrants were blamed for seducing white men into addiction, and therefore that was the first drug to be made illegal in America in 1906. The use of hemp for textile purposes continued until Mexican immigrants in the 1930s introduced Americans to the practice of smoking it. Americans panicked. California subsequently banned the preparation of hemp, meaning the smoking of the bud part, and lots of western states followed suit. In the East, the issue was mainly aimed at black jazz musicians and their weed smoking habits. Their new demonic music was said to be a result of the paroxysms brought on by marijuana. Henry Anslinger, the future head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, is quoted as saying, listen to this, the primary reason to outlaw marijuana is its effect on the degenerate races, and reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men. Please understand that those racial slurs are not my own words, but historical fact that I am quoting to make my point. I don't support the use of them, and no matter the time period, these were wildly inappropriate statements for a public figure to make. This is when we see that familiar tactic, mass hysteria, really creep up on us. This is the era of reefer madness. Marijuana smoking began to be associated with murder and violence, but most of it was really displaced fear of other races. For example, the newspaper tycoon and really all-around jerk, William Randolph Hearst, wrote, "Three-fourths of the crimes of violence in this country today are committed by dope slaves. That's a matter of cold record." Obviously, you and I can see the gaping holes in that statement. For one thing, he cites no actual sources, and for another thing, what the fuck is a dope slave? When was the last time you saw a stoner get out of his chair, let alone have the energy to kill someone? No way. What's horrible here is that the layman did not know that the hemp in their backyard was the same plant that the media was demonizing. As soon as hemp was in non-white hands, it became the exotic and threatening marijuana. One contemporary opponent of the bill to ban hemp is quoted as saying, "At this point, marijuana was a sensationalist word used to refer to Mexicans smoking a drug and had not been connected in most people's minds to the existing cannabis hemp plant. Thus, many who had legitimate reasons to oppose the bill weren't even aware of it. But surprise, surprise, they ignored him." So what is my point here? Well, I have two. The first is that it astounds me how little people know about this topic. Anyone who is upholding this racist legacy that is hemp prohibition really needs to be set straight. Seriously, explain to a prohibition supporter why they're being very, very racist and see if they change their tune. The second is that we still use the hysterical and racist term marijuana to describe this plant, instead of the correct and neutral word hemp, or cannabis, or ganja, or weed, or pot, or whatever. Words are very important, and we really won't pull ourselves out of this hurricane of hysteria until we realize that our language and our culture used to be peaceful with pot. So guys, let's all avoid using the word marijuana whenever possible and educate people about why we're doing it. Thank you.